nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along.
Today is November 17th, 2011. My name is Sue Paul, and I am at the Warhawk Air Museum in Nampa, Idaho, conducting a Veterans History Project interview. Today we will be interviewing Mr. Dick Lemmons. Welcome to the Warhawk Air Museum, sir.
Glad
It's an
to be
honor
here.
to have you here.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Also present in the room is Al Pilch, who will be doing our filming. Could you please state your full name, sir?
Richard L. Lemmon,
And your current address?
547 West Black Rock Road, Meridian, Idaho.
And could you tell us your birth date and where you were born?
I was born on November 6, 1931 in Indiana, Pennsylvania.
And tell us the division of the military in which you served and the years that you served.
Okay, I was in the Army, and I always the artillery, and I started out in the National Guard with the 200th Artillery Battalion in Lewisburg, National Guard.
And what year was that?
That was starting in 1949.
Okay.
And then when I went to Korea, I was with the 92nd Armored Field Artillery Battalion.
Okay. And you retired from the military what year?
I retired in 1952. I never spent an extra day in the Army.
Thank you very much. Dick, you were born in 1931 in Indiana. Tell us, what was that where you grew up? Did you live there all your life?
No, I was born there, but my parents moved to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania in about 1944.
Okay.
So that's where I went to high school, and I call Lewisburg my hometown.
And during high school, what did you like doing? What were your high school years like?
Well, I was a football player and stuff like that. I was not a good student, though, but Lewisburg was a good place to grow up, though.
What did your father do for a living?
He was chief of police at Bucknell University.
And did your mother work?
No, not until she was pretty old. She worked at a hospital, but mostly as a volunteer.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I have 3 sisters and a brother.
And where are you in that mix?
I am second.
Okay. So you grew up in the 40s in high school and loved football, and did you have any feelings about what you wanted to do when you graduated from high school?
Not really. When I graduated from high school, this is how I got in the Army. There were a bunch of us who considered joining the National Guard. They had an armory right there in Lewisburg. And if you joined the National Guard at that point in time, you didn't have to worry about being drafted because they didn't take people out of the Guard. So about 4 or 5 of us, right from my class of 49, signed up in the National Guard. And that was kind of fun. Nobody was talking about the Korean War yet. So we went to camp. We got a week's pay for going to camp, and we got to go to drill every once a month. And we got a day's pay, like an Army private. Mm-hmm. And that was fun. But
did
then,
you work also then? You had a job then in addition to that?
Yeah, I had a
or you went
job.
to school,
I worked at different jobs. I intended to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
1950, time to go to the Guard camp again, but the war broke out in June. So things have changed. The National Guard is in danger of being called up. Strong rumors about the 28th Infantry Division, which was the Pennsylvania National Guard. Everybody thought they were going to be called, but they never were. But the Guard unit I belonged to was the 200th Field Artillery. They had armories in Lewisburg, Lock Haven, Danville, and Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, all right there in central Pennsylvania. Well, when the Korean War broke out, Harry Truman edicted that you only had to spend a year in Korea. Well, this created a huge problem because they didn't have enough artillery non-coms. So they called up our battery, our battalion there in Pennsylvania, sent us to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We loaded all our stuff on a flat cart, all our guns, all our equipment, and put us in a railroad car, and we took the trip to Fort Campbell, which is near Nashville. And there we became a training battalion. So we thought we were out of the war already, just training. But we were very good at it, though.
Was there much information given to you about the war, what it was, and where
probably
we were?
no more than I read in the paper myself.
Okay.
And I'm a history student, you know, so I read up on it. And when I knew that I was going to go in the Army, I really decided I've got to learn something about artillery. And I studied the operations manual and the maintenance manual, and I really knew all there was to know about a 155 howitzer. So we went on there for until about, well, the battery was called up in January of '51, and we went to Fort Campbell, and we became a very well-known training command. We would get a group of new recruits and train them in artillery. Right after they had infantry basic, they sent them to artillery. And we'd give them a lot more training. So we went through several cycles of that. And I became a drill instructor, got promoted to staff sergeant, and I thought I'd spend the rest of my Army career there. Not so.
And you'd gone in for 4 years?
I was in the National Guard for 3 years.
For 3 years?
3-year National Guard was 3-year enlistment. And, you know, I thought we were just, when I joined up, we were just going to help out when they have floods around the river and all that stuff, you know, but I didn't know it was going to lead me to the Korean War, but it did. About July of 1951, I got called up. Some of my friends that I went into the Guard with, one of them named Bill Goss, he volunteered and went to Korea. And
before you did?
Before I did. And I didn't want to volunteer. My mother would have shot me. So, but that didn't last long. I was soon called. By July, I was on my way to Korea.
Was everyone in your group sent to Korea?
No, only the non-commissioned officers that were well trained.
Oh.
So we knew artillery. I mean, there's no use sending a private over there. You can train them when they get there. But in fact, we never saw any of those guys that we trained at Fort Campbell. I never saw any of them. But,
so they needed you there to teach the men that were there.
Yeah.
How to be efficient.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, with the artillery.
But the Truman Edict about 1 year in Korea was starting to take effect a lot because the war had been going on a year at that point in time. And all these artillery sergeants, they're going home if they can find a replacement for you. Well, I was a well-qualified replacement, having been a drill instructor. So I went away, went to Korea,
How did you get to Korea?
By rail out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. A whole train load of us went. And we got to San Francisco and got on a troop ship called the General John Pope. Had about 6,000 people on it, stacked up 6 high on bunks, you know, and everybody's puking and all that. This place made you ill. But it was a miserable trip. But
and where did you go? Where did you land? Where did
we landed at Busan, Korea.
Busan, Korea. Why don't you show us on the map, if you would,
Busan,
just in general, where on the map Korea
it's not on
is?
that map.
Yeah, up
It's
here.
right down here on the southeastern corner. right where that, right there.
Okay.
And that harbor there was a harbor big enough to take that monstrous troop ship.
Well, did you have any expectations about what it would be like in Korea? Just the country itself, what you were getting into in
Well,
terms
I'll
of
tell you, when I got off that boat, it was a shocking thing. We got off, and here in the harbor are thousands of starving children. All kind of people starving. No toilet facilities, very little food. They're living in cardboard boxes, or anything I could put together for a house. And this was by October, and it was cold. And it was really sickening. It's hard to describe what happened. But we lined us up, they lined us up, and we went single file to a Repel depot where they hold you until you find out where you're going to go. And we went single file, and it was so bad that some of the guys were really getting sick. So you had to put your right hand on the guy in front of you, and you walk about a mile, maybe 2 miles, and we got to this place. It was an old schoolhouse, and we stayed there a day or two. A couple shocking things, there was a woman had been hung during the night. Nobody's paying any attention. She's just hanging there. But the next day they came around and took her down. But things like that to a American who had never seen anything like that was a real shock. But from there, they put us on a miserable old train. We could only run it during the day because the Chinese used to blow up the tracks every night. So it took us about 4 days to go about 150 miles.
Did you know at that point, had you done any research just for yourself personally about the North Korean invasion into South Korea and why we were there in the first place?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I didn't understand why North Korea did that,
But you were aware of the history.
Of course, it went their way for a long time. Pusan, there was a perimeter where that was the last holdout for the American troops. They only had the 24th and 25th Infantry Divisions were the only ones holding it back. But that changed quickly. We got a lot more people over there.
Were you part of the build-up?
Well,
Your
yes.
group going in?
The battalion I went. Let me go. How I got to the 92nd first. I got on this train, went to Seoul, and from Seoul they put us on the back of a 6x, a truck, and went up over the mountains. And you look over the edge, and there's a whole bunch of old vehicles down there that they just, if your truck stalled, they just pushed you off the road. They let you out first. It was scary, very scary. But I arrived at my battalion, the 92nd, a great battalion. I was proud of them then. I'm proud of them now. They were great, probably the best artillery battalion I've ever heard of.
And you didn't know anyone when you first arrived
Didn't know
there?
any, not a
And
soul.
Everyone was just kind of bonding together at that point?
There were two of us. I went to Charlie Battery, and another guy that I knew well went to Baker Battery.
Okay.
But as far, go back to your question about the war, by that time, the Americans had taken over the air. I mean, we had control of the air. I mean, they didn't dare put an airplane in the air at all, or we would, our Air Force would have blown it away. And there was a huge difference in the air, in the war, because you didn't have to worry about being bombed and strafed. But I arrived, excuse me. I arrived at the battery late at night off of this truck, and they gave us something to eat, and we went to different tents and slept the night. And first thing in the morning, I got the the battery commander's orderly come over to get me, and Captain wants to talk to you. So I went over there, and he says, come with me, and I go over to number 4 howitzer, and he said, I understand you're a gunner. I said, yes, sir. He says, are you a good one? And I said, yes, sir. So, okay, you're going to be the gunner on this howitzer, okay? So about an hour later, somebody calls for a fire mission for number 4.
And what does that mean, a fire
That means
mission?
I was the one who was running the gun sights. I had a 0 in for that fire mission. And I guess I must have done it right. It was only 2 rounds, and I think the captain just wanted to see if I could hit the range markers. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
So from that day on, I was the gunner on that for probably 2 months.
Did you see a lot of action during those 2 months?
Oh yeah, we were firing a lot. The Chinese Spring Offensive was still going on.
Would you explain what that is, just very briefly? What was the Chinese Spring Offensive?
Pardon me?
What was that? What was
Well, in after the Chosin Reservoir battle, which was in December of 1950, the Chinese were, followed the first. You remember I don't know whether you know or not, but the 7th Marine Division, 7th Infantry Division, and the 1st Marine Division were trapped at the Chosin Reservoir, suffering huge casualties. My battalion was there. This was before I got there, and they were responsible for blowing the Chinese off the top of the mountain. Chinese had the high ground. We had to stay on the low ground because of mechanization. Our trucks couldn't take the mountain. So that's the way it was. The 92nd was assigned to blow those Chinese off that mountain, and they did. And they helped them to escape. They were surrounded. They escaped down to Hungnam Ri, the port city, and were put on ships and came around Korea, down around the southern edge there. And that's where they spent Christmas Eve in 1950, sitting there waiting to be put back on the ground again. But just to look forward here, when we didn't get a presidential unit citation for that. In 2001, we had an ex 2-star general in our battery at our reunion, and he said, "I'm going to try and get us a presidential unit citation."
Because you were never given one at that
Pardon
time.
me?
You were never given one at that time in the 50s.
And it was determined that they deserved it. The Marines agreed. So we did get that, and that was awarded to us at our 2002 reunion at Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah, and we have pictures we'll show a little bit later in the
Yes,
film of that. Yeah, that must have meant a lot.
So
back to your being your experiences while you were there. So you were taken then in. Did you stay pretty much in the area where you were stationed, or did you move into different areas?
Yes, as a matter of fact, at that point in time, the Korean War had settled down to pretty much an artillery battle. The area right across, right here, we had artillery packed in there almost wheel to wheel, firing a lot.
Why don't you show us on the map? Yeah, let's look at that more detailed map.
This is the demilitarized zone, and there was a little town called Kumwa, and there was nothing left of it but the chimney from the bank. But we were there, and we were still doing a lot of firing. So,
I'm going to show a few pictures here of your camp where you lived.
okay.
And you were there for how long? How long
I
were you
was in
stationed there?
Korea for 10 months.
10 months at
My
this
National
base.
Guard enlistment expired, so they let me out 2 months early.
These are the pictures of your camp. I'm just going to show these. And this is a lineup of a lot of men standing outside of their tents. You lived in those tents.
Yeah, they're squad tents, yes. They're 12 men apiece, yes.
And then here you have preparing tools
Yes.
for inspection. Did that happen daily?
No, this happened, this was what they call a command and battle inspection, where they
Okay.
pulled you back a little bit, gave you a break from the action, and had an inspection to make sure that you had all the tools and equipment that you needed.
Was there action every day?
No,
No.
no.
So you had some breaks.
We had Saturday morning inspections every Saturday morning up at where we were stationed, but that was captain's choice. So
These are howitzers right here of the sea battery, and then that shows. And then this is Charlie Battery. This is an inspection line, just to see what it looks like. These are
Yeah.
great pictures. The battery commander, Captain
that's JT Really.
JT. He was your commander.
Yes, he was. That's still one of my best friends.
And then we have. What did you think of the howitzer? I'm just curious, since you spent.
What did I
What
think?
did you think of it as a piece of equipment?
Oh, it was the best.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
Was it accurate?
It replaced the old ground mount jobs. There's a picture of them in there. One of the howitzers exploded, and they had a replacement with a ground mount. But these were mounted. The ones we had were mounted on an M41 tank, and this was far superior as far as moving into position and starting to fire. We had all kinds of advantages.
I think these are you beginning to fire.
That's one in action.
Okay, why don't you hold that, and I'll show several of these. And this is actually combat. These are combat pictures.
Yeah, every bit of it.
How long between each firing did you have? And you had to load the powder and.
Well, we could fire them one round a minute per gun, but we didn't do that very often. That would burn up the gun barrel.
And did you have an actual target that you were going after, one target at a time, or how wide was the spray? I mean, how much could you hit at one time?
These howitzers had a specified range of 16,500 yards, but you can't hit anything at that range. So we could fire up to 12,000 yards
Just show that one
and be
too.
pretty accurate. And so, yeah, there's one we just fired. You see the gun smoke?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you were called whenever they were close enough that you could.
Well, anytime
Get them.
we had forward observers from out on the mountaintops, and the infantry was out there too, and they would call in fire missions for us if they wanted us to fire at the enemy. And also we had an airplane group with us, which would patrol over the area, and that's where we'd get some other fire missions. And we were doing a lot of firing. During the day, that's the way it was. Now, during the night, we would fire what was called harassment and interdiction rounds. We knew where the enemy probably was, so we would just drop a round or two in there, something different, anytime you wanted, sometimes 40 or 50 rounds a night. So we were busy. It was a great, had a lot of excitement. And I was right in the middle of it. I was the gunner on the base gun, but I did that for a couple of months, and then my section chief got promoted to chief of firing battery. So I got his spot, and I got promoted to sergeant first class. And I was only a sergeant first class for about a month, and the sergeant got sent home, and I took his place as chief of firing battery, and promoted to master sergeant within 2 months. So I had an incredible run of promotions. I got promoted 6 times in 2.5 years, including the National Guard.
And you were pretty young. You were in your
Yeah,
20s.
well, I was only 20 when I got out of the Army, and I come home and got out of the Army, and I wasn't old enough to vote. So
Isn't that amazing?
that was
Yeah.
different. But
So in 10 months, in the 10 months that you were there, the Chinese Spring Offensive of 1951,
there.
you were
Yeah,
that
we
was
held
there
that
while you
back.
were there, and the Battle of the Iron Triangle
yes,
was there, and that
yes.
was a little bit different, wasn't it?
Well, the
Tell us
Iron
about that.
Triangle, I'll go back here again. There are 3 towns here. One, this is Pyongyang, right here in the north, and this is Chorwan right here.
Hold on one second. I gotta get
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry.
Maybe, Larry, could you just hold it? Thanks.
Yeah, this is Pyongyang, Chorwan, and Kumwa. We were right at the eastern corner of that triangle. Right in the middle of the triangle, there was a huge mountain called Old Papasan. Chinese owned that. All right, and they weren't going to give up, and we were constantly trying to get them off there. All kind of things were happening.
They were trying to build airstrips back there, weren't they? Also.
Well, the airstrips were further south.
Oh, were they? Okay.
This was just a huge mountain. You couldn't put them, but the Chinese were dug in deep. I mean, they'd bring in napalm. They'd drop napalm bombs out of with the Air Force, and they covered that mountain forever. The American Army decided just let them have it. We'll play whack-a-mule, and every time they get out of their holes, we're going to hit them. So that's the way it was as long as I was there. Then a lot of firing, and
did we sustain a lot of casualties in that area?
No. Miraculously, all the 10 months I was there, the only time I got shot at was by our own aircraft carrier off the Boxer. I don't like to say anything bad about them, but
it happened.
they come in and bombed and strafe us one morning, Sunday morning, everything nice and quiet, and here comes 4 of those F-4 Corsairs off the Boxer. And they didn't hit anybody at our place, but they killed several engineers who were down the river there about 2 miles from us.
Were they given misinformation?
What?
Were they given misinformation?
Well, you have these identification markers. They're 4 feet by 8 feet. They're brown. They're orange, bright colored, and you have 2 of them. And you have to have them in the right configuration every day. And if you don't, you're a target. Well, we had ours right, but the thing that happened was the Boxer had a brand new squadron of pilots, and they didn't know what was going on. And they come in and did this several times at several places, and the commander of the Boxer kicked them off.
I bet.
That was the end of them. And
Yeah, that's pretty tragic.
and I found this out many, many years later, who they were I haven't talked about the Freedom Museum yet, where I was a volunteer in Manassas, but some old guy in an F-4 comes flying in there. He wasn't on the Boxer, but he was much too young for that, but my first sergeant, my good friend Miller Wetzel, says, "Hey, you guys bombed and strafed us in Korea." And the guy said, "Yeah, I heard about that, but I wasn't there. But I'll tell you, those guys were a reserve outfit, and they didn't know what they were doing, and the captain of the ship kicked them right off the boat." So
So in the 10 months that you were there, then did you have any experience with or interactions with the South Korean military?
yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. The ROK Army, Republic of Korea, the South Korean Army, when the 1st Battalion first arrived in Korea, they were undermanned. And we're supposed to have 700 men in the battalion. There were 200 men short. So the South Korean Army provided those extra 200 guys, and they were good soldiers, and they integrated very well. Some of them, that was their home. And they fought hard from the beginning of the war all the way to the end. They didn't have any rotation situation that they could look forward to. They were there till the end, and they were very, very good soldiers. And I got to be good friends with several of them.
Right.
They would do the crummiest jobs, like making sure the breech blocks are all polished up and everything. Nice guys, Yeah.
What about the North Koreans? Did you have any opinion about them as soldiers, whether they were good, bad, indifferent, or real strong adversaries?
Well, in respect to artillery, they were not good. They were using obsolete equipment that the Russians didn't want, and we had so many advantages over them in respect to air power. I mean, they had to stay in their holes all day. We could go out anytime we wanted and not worried about getting bombed, as long as the boxer wasn't close. But,
Yeah.
But we had a very superior situation there. We had forward observers that could. The big thing was communications. Every howitzer in our battalion had a phone in it, a telephone, and it was connected. You could go to the forward observer directly, or you could go to Fire Direction Center, or you could go to the infantry battalion that was out there calling for help. We had all that communication. Now the Chinese had nothing like that. The only phones they had were at the regimental level, and that's not good. You can't fire an artillery battalion that way. They would use semaphore signals and bugle calls and all that stuff. Very primitive. And some of that equipment, I understand, was when the Russians and the Chinese fought in 1904. That was some of their artillery. So we had a huge advantage that way, and it showed. We didn't have to worry about them. And if we have enough time, I'll talk about one battle at the end of the war. I wasn't there for that, but.
What was your most memorable experience or experiences while you were there for those 10 months?
Well, I guess what happened to me, I arrived when I was a staff sergeant, and I got put on the base gun as the gunner. I zeroed in for everybody else, and then I got section chief, and a couple of months later, I got promoted to master sergeant. I mean, this is incredible. I just happened to be the right guy at the right time. I didn't expect to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to be a master sergeant.
But you knew how to work your equipment. You knew what you were
I
doing.
knew the guns. That's what got me where I was.
Sure.
I was the foremost expert they had on that 155 howitzer. And the whole thing was a big, I love combat. Crazy. I didn't feel like I was in intimate danger or anything like ever, except when the boxer guys came through. But that's the way it was. And
So when you came home, when you came back to the United States, how much longer before? Actually, let me retract that. What was your opinion of General MacArthur?
Oh.
Because that was very important personality during that war. What did you think of him?
Believe me, anybody who was in my battalion, because they were at Frozen Chosen, MacArthur is the one that sent them up there, way far off of their supply lines. Big mistake military, and I was glad to see him get fired. Had to do it. I'm a Harry Truman. I think Harry did the right thing.
Where were you when he was fired?
I think I was back home.
You'd already come home, yeah.
Because he wanted to go back up to the Yalu River, and no, you can't do that. You know, you can't. The Chinese had millions of men in their army. We couldn't do that. We couldn't beat that. We couldn't. No matter how much armament and power and air force we had, you just couldn't. You couldn't beat them.
When that war or that conflict, a lot of people thought of it as a conflict, but when it was a war, when it stopped, it never was really ended, because with the 38th parallel,
the peace talks went on and on.
Yeah, and it still is an issue, of course, to this day. Fact, but how did you feel about the way that it was stopped? Did you feel that was the right thing to do, or?
You know, when I told you I got on the ship at San Francisco, the peace talks had started. I get there and I stay 10 months and they're still talking. Mm-hmm. They haven't even decided whether the peace talk table is going to be round or square. You know, they were just stalling. That's all it was. But you know, it took until July of '53 before the thing was finally stopped. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting back there going to college at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of men there in Korea. A lot of men died.
Oh, yes.
During that very short period of time of that war. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you came back to the United States then. Were you glad to be? Were you married, or did you have a girlfriend or anything at that time?
I was not married.
Okay.
No,
no relationship. So were you glad to be home?
Oh, yeah.
And you came back to where? Where did they bring you?
I came back to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And I got mustered out of the Army at Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, on a Friday. Mm-hmm. Monday, I went to a school called Williamsport Technical Institute, which was right up the road from Lewisburg. And I said, "Can I come back to school?" I started a school at Bucknell. Mm-hmm. I didn't belong there.
But you got out of the military for good then.
Yeah, I didn't.
You were done.
You know, I'm just a kid. You know, I'm 20 years old and I'm a master sergeant.
What did you come out of that experience, though? I mean, you were a young guy, and very quickly, you know, went up in your.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Were you different when you came back?
Oh yeah.
In what way?
Well, I'm mature. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm just a kid when I go in. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm like a Boy Scout going to camp. You know, going to these National Guard encampments and stuff like that. But I come back. You know, I had about 50 guys that I was in control of there. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot. And this one picture you saw of the 5 sergeants, did we show that? No, we didn't show that yet.
No, we'll find that and show it. Yeah,
one of those guys was a guy named Miller Wetzel. He was the first sergeant. And he didn't know anything about artillery, but he was an old Marine guy. He signed up in the National Guard after World War II. He had been in Okinawa, and he was a great soldier. And he taught me how to be a master sergeant. So the two of us were really fit together, and he died in 2005.
But you remained friends all those years?
All those years. Yeah. We stayed in contact. Mm-hmm. And when we started having these reunions, he and I organized the first one and the third one at Washington, D.C.
You received this medal. Tell us about this, and I'm going to read the citation for this, if I may.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is, if you'll hold this with your other hand next to it so we can put this whole thing on film. Okay. This is the Bronze Star medal. And your citation reads, "By direction of the President, under the provisions of Executive Order 9419 for February 1944, and pursuant to authority in AR 600-45, the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service in connection with military operations against an enemy of the United States during the period indicated is awarded to the following named enlisted man: Master Sergeant Richard L. Lemmon, Artillery Battery C, 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion, United States Army in Korea, is cited for meritorious service during the period 19 October 1951 to 10 July 1952. Sergeant Lemmon, assigned as Chief of Firing Battery, applied himself diligently and earnestly to his duties, setting an example for the members of the howitzer sections who, while inexperienced, quickly responded to his capable leadership, aggressive spirit, and sound judgment. His courage and cheerfulness under adverse conditions of weather and terrain, and his confidence in the ultimate success of the mission of his unit installed confidence in his men, resulting in the highest morale and materially increasing the effectiveness of his unit in its operations. Sergeant Lemmon's outstanding performance reflects great credit upon himself and the military service. Entered the Federal service from Pennsylvania by command of Major General Cleland.
Thank you.
That is a well-deserved
Thank you.
medal that you received.
You know, the way this happened, I was home. I was discharged. And my mother was reading the newspaper one day, about 3 or 4 days after I got home, and she sees this article in the paper that says Master Sergeant Lemmon awarded the Bronze Star in Korea. Wow, I didn't know that. It was odd.
Oh.
But I got a letter in a day or two that from the Army that said I was awarded that, and they invited me to get down to Indiantown Gap and get it, but I didn't. But I could check the box if I wanted it mailed to me, so I got it mailed because I was in school already. So that's the way it happened.
Yeah,
And
that's
it was a surprise to
well
me.
deserved.
Thank you.
This is also one that this was given to you, presented to Master Sergeant Richard L. Lemmon with sincere gratitude and appreciation for his distinguished service in Sea Battery, 92nd Armored Field Artillery Battalion, U.S. Army as Chief of Firing Battery, 1951 to 1952 in the Republic of Korea. J.T. Raley, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, retired, and this was given to you on May 2nd, 2000. So he was your commanding officer
Yes, he
in
was.
Korea.
Yes. He came up to my first sergeant lived in Manassas, Virginia, and I only lived a few miles away from there. And we used to go down to visit the colonel, and he'd come up to visit us, and we would take him on Civil War battlefield tours. He was a big Civil War historian, and he asked us to get in touch with a newspaper. He wanted to have a presentation, so he came up, and I guess this was in May of 2002, and he came up and he had the newspapers there, and they took pictures, and he awarded Miller Wetzel and I. We both got one. We were the inseparable pals in Korea, so that was really something.
And then you somehow became involved in creating a reunion for the battalion.
Yes.
What year did you start working on that?
All right. The first reunion was held in 1998 at Washington, D.C., and we had a couple guys from the battalion, one of them named Pete Tormino, who decided we ought to have a reunion, and he started to find guys. And by 1998, he had found 400 guys.
Wow.
Amazing. And he spent all his time on the phone. And we had another guy named Guy McMenemy who was going to do all the secretary and treasury work, and they sent out a questionnaire asking where you'd like to have the first reunion. And of course, Washington, D.C., we got almost all the votes. It was almost unanimous. And he knew that Miller Wetzel and I were lived right outside Washington, only about 25 miles. So we went into Washington and scouted out several hotels, and finally decided that we would have the reunion headquarters at Georgetown University Conference Center. And we set up this ceremony at the Korean War Memorial, and we had a tour of all the sites at Washington, the Air Museum, and all that stuff. And it was just marvelous. And we got 72 guys to come.
And this is a picture, actually, of those 72 guys. This is the very first reunion, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah. 1998. That's a lot of people to come to the first reunion.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
After 48 years.
Yeah, that's very, very impressive. I mean, it really is.
Well, these guys were proud guys. I mean, this battalion in Korea was first class, I'll tell you.
So this picture I'm going to show now, did any of these guys come?
This is my favorite picture.
Okay, tell us about it and why. Did any of these men come to the reunion?
Just Wetzel and I. The other three are dead.
Okay, but Wetzel.
But
okay.
These were the sergeants from Charlie Battery, and
you're right here. This is you.
Yeah, that's me. I look a little younger. My hair is black, But those guys were all 8 or 10 years older than I was. So, and they were old soldiers, and they sort of helped me out a lot.
They were your mentors, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. This was taken how long after you were in Korea? How long after?
This was probably this was in the spring of '52,
okay.
right? And I had been in Korea for about 8 or 9 months, and I'd been
Almost
promoted
ready to go
twice in that time. So,
okay. And so, you mentioned also that there are a couple of pictures here I want to show so that you can explain. What they are. You were invited to the opening of the Korean Memorial.
Yes. I don't think it's in that same book. The Korean War Monument was finally finished in 1995.
And the man that's with you in this picture is?
Okay, this guy is...
and this is you right here in the middle. I have you, and the man next to you with the hat on.
And the guy that's beside me is Billy Goss, who was with me in Lewisburg High School, graduated in class 49. And he was commander of the San Jose chapter of the American Legion in California, and the Legion sent him back so he can take pictures and report on what happened at the dedication.
What did you think of the memorial?
Oh, I think it was magnificent.
Yeah.
But I have more to say about that.
Okay, good. I'm going to turn it over so we can see the other picture, the other side. These are all cast iron figures. And it depicts, for people who have not seen this memorial, it depicts soldiers in the wintertime in Korea. And you must have experienced that horrendous cold.
Yeah, I was there in the second winter, yes.
Okay. And it was pretty bad, wasn't it?
Not bad. The second winter wasn't bad. The first winter was horrible.
It was the worst one. Yeah.
The second winter we had fur-lined parkas and all that stuff, so we survived a lot easier than the first winter, yes.
Right. So what would you like to say about the memorial?
Well, it was very nice. I was impressed. Now, what I have to say following that, when we went back there, the battalion went back there for the reunion in 2001, and the memorial was in terrible shape. So
Really?
I have a scrapbook here, but I don't know if I dig it out or not. But
what did it look like?
Well, the foliage and between the rows was supposed to represent rice paddies. It was dead. There were cracks in the marble wall, and the pool leaked. It was horrible. So our battalion sent a letter to the director of the United States Park Service or something. I don't know exactly who they were, and complained about how sad that was, and they fixed it.
Because when I saw it just
They
2 years
spent,
ago, it was
yeah,
spectacular.
they spent $2.5 million fixing it. So
That's
and they did it
incredible.
in about a year. We were really impressed.
Tell me about this. This is about the man in this picture. There's one man that's being handed something
Yeah.
here, and so if you would just tell me about that.
Okay, this is a ceremony we had at the Korean War Memorial. At the end of the war, the battalion got surrounded by the Chinese. First time they were really in danger, and they were told to get out of there because they were going to be wiped out. Well, the battery commander and the battery exec were in this Jeep. The battery commander was on the front seat, and this gentleman who got the Purple
This
Heart
gentleman here.
that's can't remember his name. So,
Willard.
Rudd. Gentleman, real nice guy. He was the driver, and Lieutenant Pierce was in the back seat, and they were trying to crash through this Chinese roadblock. All of them got hit. All the tires are blown on the Jeep. Willard Rudd keeps driving. He was hit in both knees, and he made it to safety. All three of them were badly wounded. They were medevaced out to a hospital ship right off the coast. But this was a battery commander and exec. Nobody wrote him up for a Purple Heart. So about almost 50 years later, we decide we got to get Willard Rudd has got to get the Purple Heart. So started to ask for Pierce and Lafferty, those two lieutenants, to write an affidavit saying that he deserved the Purple Heart. And he had, no doubt about it, he did it. And as soon as those affidavits hit the Wars Department, they said, well, we'll do it. So one day before the reunion in 2002, I got it at my house. They mailed it to me. He didn't know he was going to get it, but we knew he was coming to the reunion. So at the reunion, we had our old battery commander's wife, who was deceased, and his daughter. They were there to make the award, to actually put it on it. But two of our guys read the citations that these guys wrote, and it was really elegant, I thought. It was a great ceremony. Everybody's crying, you know.
I'd like to read these two, because you indicated to me that this really hit it in the nutshell, these two letters.
Yeah.
Dear Willard, in the pre-dawn darkness, 48 years ago, on July 14th, you and I and Cliff Pierce were leading Charlie Battery out of a mini canyon position which we had occupied for 5 days and nights. As we approached the main east-west highway, the terrain flattened, and sitting next to you in the front seat of the Jeep, I was thinking, just another 100 yards and we hit the highway and we've got a good chance of making it out of here. Then all hell broke loose. You and I were hit, and you kept our Jeep on a steady straight as a die course, and Cliff was hanging on to my fatigue jack collar so I wouldn't fall out of the Jeep. Willard, you kept nursing that Jeep along and driving. Traffic was bedlam on the highway. Then we came to the T-junction, and the last I remember is seeing Captain Rader there directing traffic. Barbara and I want to thank you for your bravery and courage that morning during your tour in Korea. Our 5 children and 8 grandchildren thank you as well, and our families and friends and acquaintances. And now, after all these years, the Purple Heart Award for a very brave and cool-headed Corporal Willard Rudd, who kept our Jeep moving and leading our column to safety. You know, Willard, sometimes when I'm writing letters or adding a bit to a manuscript, I ponder and recognize the challenge to be clear, and at the same time not to take all day to say it. You said it all in one of your recent letters, my friend. You wrote, Hugh, you and I drove a lot of miles with the lights out, and we did. And he says, God bless you in your house, and it's signed by Hugh Rafferty. And you knew both these men and felt that that was a very, and this is the second one that was written by a man named Cliff
Cliff Pierce. Yeah.
Cliff Pierce, who was one of your best friends.
Well, he would. No, I never knew him, but he was the executive officer.
The executive officer that was with him.
When this guy was commander.
Okay.
So.
I should have written this letter to you and your family before this. Please forgive me as I got caught up in building a life like all of us. I can tell you that you have been mentioned many times by your actions early the morning of July 14th, 1953. My family and friends are aware of your courageous actions. Yes, the three of us in the Jeep of Passage leading the column were all wounded, but you kept driving the vehicle even though you were wounded several times. The enemy was jumping out at our vehicle, trying desperately to halt the column. You kept driving under the most horrible conditions, with front tires flat. You stopped only when we needed to check location and when we picked up Captain Rader. We all owe our lives to you, Willard. When you realized that we all came home, fathered children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, your action made it possible for many people to lead productive and rewarding lives. Please accept our deepest gratitude and thanks. And this obviously meant so much to you.
Oh, yes.
To see this man.
To all of us. Yeah.
To all of you, your entire battalion,
every member
to see
of the battalion
him awarded that.
Yeah. That was great.
Yeah.
That was one of our prime achievements.
Just for a sec. These pictures are about. Tell us about these pictures, please.
All right. This was at the Asheville, North Carolina reunion. I think it was in 2002, where we had found out that the battalion had won the Presidential Unit Citation for their actions at the Frozen Chosin. A big battle that we lost at, this is where our battery helped to keep the Chinese blown off the hills while all the mechanized armies come down the valley. And the Marines agreed and the 7th Infantry agreed that we deserved the Presidential Unit Citation. And this was at the award ceremony. And the general who made the awards, General Mark Kimmett. You might have seen him on CNN. He was the newscaster for the Army during Desert Storm.
Oh, okay.
So
he made the award.
He
made the award. He presented.
He made the award, and he read the citation, which
I'll read. And you said you found 37. There were 37 men.
36 men that we could find that had. Now, a lot more of them were eligible, but a lot of them were dead, and we couldn't find the rest of them. So
this says, "Least we forget." This was what was written. This is the citation. By virtue of the authority vested in me as President of the United States and as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States, I have today awarded the Presidential Unit Citation Army for extraordinary heroism to the 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion. The 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion distinguished themselves in combat during the period November 27, 1950 to December 11, 1950 by extraordinary heroism and outstanding performance of duty and action against the enemy in North Korea. The battalion's mission was to assist in the relief of surrounded units of the 1st Marine Division and other Army forces of the 7th Infantry Division. The battalion supported the Marines in their attacks as well as Task Force Dog in the area of Chinhungnai, North Korea, holding that area open until the surrounded forces were completely pulled out. Despite extreme cold and the absence of sleeping bags, the morale of the battalion remained high and proud of their great effort in this mission. Throughout the march from the vicinity of Majongdong to Chinhungnai, the task force had to negotiate several dangerous and treacherous roadblocks of trucks and a partially blown bridge. The 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion's communications proved superior to any other and was the only reliable source of information to the task force commander. On 10 December 1950, a report was received that an enemy force was on Hill 577 near Sundong Nai, 3,000 yards to its rear. Battery B was turned about and fired on the hill, effectively neutralizing it. Throughout its tremendous firepower capabilities, the 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion completed its mission of assisting in holding Chinhungnai open for the evacuation of cut-off Marine and Army units. The 92nd Armed Field Artillery Battalion's exceptional professional skill, determination, and esprit de corps under extremely difficult and hazardous conditions exemplified the highest tradition of the military service.
Thank you.
Obviously, there is a great deal of pride your whole life in this battalion, and having
yes.
been a member of it, still a member of it,
Yeah, I
for the rest
still
of your
am,
life.
Yeah, I was.
That's
It's one of the biggest events of my life,
yeah.
without a doubt.
So when you got out of the battalion, when you retired from the military, you went to college.
Yeah.
And what did you become? What did you do with your life?
I became I had a couple. I got out of college. It was a 2-year school. It was a trade school. It was part of Penn State. It's Penn College of Technology, and a draftsman, really. I loved it. I loved being a draftsman, designer, and all that stuff. And I finally got a job with IBM in 1956, and I stayed there 31 years and retired. So I had a great career there, and I'm proud of that too. And
Did you and you
so
married?
I've been retired for 24 years now.
Nice.
So.
And you married?
Oh yeah, I have 4 kids.
4 children. What is your wife's name?
Nancy.
Nancy. And your children? You have 4 children, and how many grandchildren?
8.
And 8
I
grandchildren.
have 2 daughters, 2 sons, and I have 4 grandsons and 4 granddaughters. So,
gosh.
and they're all equally divided. Family planning, So.
Before we end this incredible interview, I have to tell you it's been such an honor to have you come here and allow us this privilege of preserving your history. It's so much a part of our country's history.
Yes.
And we thank you so much. You were such a young boy when you went to war and gave part of your life for this country. And because of that, this country is still the greatest nation in the world. And we hope will always be. We just can never thank you enough for being an American veteran. And the very last thing I'd like to ask you is if you could leave a thought or a message for your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren about how those years in the military as a young man, how they helped to form you to become the man you are today. What influence did those years in the military have on you?
Well, I guess the short answer is that I just matured so much in the Army and learned so much and learned how to get along with people and take charge when I had to, and things just worked out. And I've had a great life. I'm 80 years old now, and if I died today, I guess I would say I had a great life. And part of it was because of the Korean experience.
And what you learned.
Yeah, I learned a lot there.
Well, thank you so much, sir.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.
Thank the museum for having me on, because the Korean War is not forgotten by those guys that were there.
No, it's not.
And when we have our reunions, it's a very, very proud bunch that shows up.
Yeah. Well, we're sure grateful for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
These are beautiful awards that were given to you, and I'd like to read what they are. They have to do with your contribution to the battalion reunions and the preservation of your battalion's history. Is that correct?
That's right.
It says 92nd AFA, of course, Red Devils, presented to Richard L. Lemmon for unselfish devotion and distinguished service as Vice President of the 92nd Armored Field Artillery Battalion in Korea. And this was presented to you on October 15, 2002 in Asheville, North Carolina. And the second one was presented to Richard L. Lemmons in grateful recognition of outstanding leadership and unselfish devotion to duty as President of the Korean War Veterans 92nd Armored Field Artillery Battalion, October 11th, 2005 reunion, and this was held in Nashville, Tennessee. You have obviously been a huge contributor to this organization and its strength. Yeah. So you must be very proud of that.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, preserving that history.
Yeah, it's.
These are great.